On August 16, 1804, at the Camp of Boulogne, Napoleon Bonaparte realized that a modern army was not enough. To be an emperor, he needed the one thing a soldier cannot seize by force: the appearance of an ancient, inevitable lineage. He had the Grand Army, and he had the treasury of Europe, but he lacked the weight of 1,000 years. He issued a frantic order to the Cabinet des Médailles at the National Library in Paris to bring forth a relic. He didn't want a piece of furniture. He wanted a ghost to haunt the ceremony and validate his rise to the throne. He demanded the return of a silent artifact, the Throne of Dagobert, the seat of the last great Merovingian kings. This wasn't just metal. It was a physical claim to the foundations of the French state itself. But to understand why he needed it, we have to look back to the 7th century, to the man who first forged the myth. We have to look at Dagobert I, the man who unified the Frankish tribes into a single formidable entity. Dagobert was a prolific lawmaker and a patron of the arts, the architect of a unity that would define France for a millennium. But Dagobert himself was a performer. By sitting on this bronze frame, he was practicing a specific kind of theater. He was reviving the Sella Curulus, the portable seat of the ancient Roman magistrates. It was power made portable. In the 7th century, sitting here was a claim to the ghost of the Roman Empire. He was telling his people that the glory of Rome had not died. It had simply found a new Frankish home. History isn't a straight line. It is a cycle of men borrowing dignity from the people they have already buried. But the chair we see today is a masterpiece of deception, not by Dagobert, but by those who followed him. Across 1,000 years, monks and kings improved the throne, adding arms and a backrest to make it look eternal. They stitched different eras together to create a symbol that looked as if it had never known a moment of weakness. For centuries it sat in the Abbey of Saint Denis as a secular sacrament, a seat that gave kings their right to rule. Even the Revolution, in its hatred for monarchs, could not bring itself to melt this bronze. They feared its gravity. So on that August day, Napoleon prepared to take his place in this long, borrowed line of legitimacy. In front of 100,000 soldiers, the emperor sat down, and the 1,000-year-old bronze finally answered. It was not built for the ego of a modern empire. The metal, fatigued by centuries of history, finally reached its limit. The throne broke. In a single sickening snap of metal, the physical seat of power failed the man who tried to claim it. 100,000 men watched in a deafening silence. The performance of continuity had just been shattered by physics. In that moment, Napoleon understood a cold truth. You cannot forge a future by hiding in the hollowed-out bones of the past. That snap was a verdict. It told the world that the age of the Merovingians was truly dead, and no amount of theater could revive it. Today, the throne sits in the Bibliothèque Nationale, silent, repaired, and stripped of its political utility. Its true history isn't in the casting or the feline carvings. It's in the desperate hands that tried to hold on to it. Dagobert borrowed from Rome to build a kingdom. Napoleon borrowed from Dagobert to build a myth. Both discovered that power is not a chair you sit in. It is the story you tell until the metal finally breaks. Let's look at the anatomy of that failure. To understand why the throne failed Napoleon, we have to strip away the velvet and the legend. We are looking at a composite object, a physical timeline of 3 centuries that don't belong together. The foundation is the 7th century. These bronze legs are the original pulse of the Merovingian world. This metal was cast by men who still lived in the shadow of Rome. It is heavy, functional, and honest. This wasn't a king's throne. It was a commander's stool, designed to fold up and move where the war moved. It represents a period where power was defined by the man sitting in the seat, not the seat itself. But then we reach the 9th century. the era of the Carolingians, and the birth of the imperial myth. This backrest is an intrusion. It is the moment the stool stopped being a tool and started being a monument. Successors to Charlemagne felt a folding stool was too small for their ego. They wanted a static, permanent symbol. If you look at the seam, you can see the friction. They used different metal and different logic to force a new identity onto an old frame. In the 12th century, the chair found its most dangerous handler, the abbot Suger. Suger was the architect of the Gothic, a man who understood that beauty was the most effective form of propaganda. He saw a broken, mismatched stool and realized he could manufacture a miracle out of its remains. He didn't just repair the chair, he mythologized it. He gave it the name, the throne of the great King Dagobert. By naming it, he made it untouchable. He turned a structural nightmare into a relic of the state. Suger understood that a powerful name could outlast any structural flaw. To him, the myth was the engineering. But the backrest acted as a lever, putting massive pressure on a 700-year-old bronze joint. The chair was literally fighting itself. The past was being crushed by the desperate additions of the present. This is the anatomy of a forgery. Not a fake, but a truth that has been edited too many times. It is a mirror of the French monarchy, an ancient base supported by medieval repairs waiting for a crisis. Every king who sat here was complicit in the lie. They all chose to ignore the creaking of the bronze. They prioritized the silhouette over the substance, hoping the frame would hold for just one more generation. They convinced themselves that if the chair looked eternal, their right to rule would become eternal too. We tell ourselves that institutions are solid, but most are just a collection of repairs held together by a name. An institution is not destroyed by its enemies. It is destroyed by the weight of the lies it tells to save itself.
These stones breathe a slow song.
In 1793, the doors of the treasury of St. Denis were kicked open not by kings, but by the people.
The French Revolution was a systematic dismantling of the sacred. The tombs were looted and the crowns were melted. Most of the royal regalia, the symbols Suger had spent a lifetime curating, disappeared into the furnace of the Republic. But the throne survived the fire. It was saved because the revolutionaries saw it as more than a royal seat. They saw it as a scientific specimen, a rare piece of ancient metallurgy that belonged to the nation, not the crown. It was moved to the Cabinet des Médailles. It was no longer a holy relic. It was now a museum object. Enter Napoleon Bonaparte, a man who understood that you cannot rule a country through logic alone. He was a child of the revolution, but he was also a master of the stolen aesthetic. Napoleon needed a symbol that was older than the Bourbons. He needed a past that bypassed the kings he had replaced. He chose the bee, the ancient symbol of the Merovingian dynasty. He was literally stealing the DNA of the first French kings. By claiming the throne, he was issuing a declaration to the world. I am not the successor to the kings you killed. I am the successor to the warriors who built the nation. I am the return of Dagobert. This was the theft of the bees, a calculated act of identity theft to clothe a new empire in ancient robes. This brings us back to the moment of the snap, to the moment the performance met the physical world. As the metal buckled, the throne had made its position clear. The revolution tried to melt the past. Napoleon tried to wear it. Both failed to realize that history cannot be owned. The throne has seen the rise and fall of 3 dynasties. It has outlived every man who tried to sit in it. It remains a witness to the most dangerous human impulse, the need to belong to a story you didn't write.
When you try to wear it as one, the seams will always eventually tear.
After the snap at Boulogne, the throne was whisked away to be mended in secret. By 1815, Napoleon's empire was gone, but the chair he had broken was still there, waiting for the next claimant. Enter Louis XVIII, a man who returned from 20 years of exile to reclaim a legitimacy he had never actually held. He faced a bizarre humiliation. To prove he was the rightful king, he had to sit in a seat physically mangled by a usurper. They were trying to bolt the 19th century onto the 7th, hoping that modern hardware could fix an ancient fracture. Louis didn't want a repair. He wanted a restoration of the lie. He needed the cracks to vanish so he could pretend the revolution never happened.
But every bolt they added only increased the tension.
By trying to force the chair to be perfect, they were making it unusable. They treated the throne like the monarchy itself. They polished the surface while the internal structure was crumbling. Louis understood that if the throne broke a second time, the myth of the Bourbons would break with it. To save the symbol, they had to forbid anyone from actually using it. By 1850, the throne had finally transitioned from a tool of power to a curiosity. The lie hadn't become true. It had simply become so old that it stopped being dangerous and started being quaint. This is where the institution admits defeat, while pretending it is practicing reverence. Putting the throne behind glass was the ultimate act of cowardice. It ensured the chair could never fail again, but it could never lead again either. The restoration was a successful burial. Louis XVIII fixed the bronze, but he strangled the ghost. Restoration is often just a polite word for concealment. We fix the object because we are afraid to look at the break. Today, the Throne of Dagobert sits at the center of a glass and steel temple to human memory. It is no longer a relic or a throne. It is a data point in the history of French survival. Under the modern lens, the scenes we've discussed are no longer hidden. They are the entire point of the display. We have mapped every fracture, every rivet, and every drop of 19th century solder. We can see the exact moment the 7th century bronze gave way to the 9th century repair. This is the final stage of the object's life, the forensic autopsy of a political lie. We look at this chair because it is the only physical witness left to 1,000 years of human insecurity. The snap at Boulogne was the moment the chair stopped being a tool for the powerful and started being a lesson for the rest of us. It teaches us that legitimacy cannot be manufactured by bolting your name onto someone else's achievement. We want the chair to be real, because if the chair is real, then the power that sat in it might have been real too. We are still obsessed with the Throne of Dagobert, because we are still obsessed with the idea of a shortcut to greatness. But the bronze has outlasted every man who tried to use it as a stage. It has survived by being more honest than its owners. Power is a performance that eventually runs out of audience. But the object remains. We preserve the break because the break is the only part of the story that isn't a performance. History is not the throne. History is the sound the metal makes when the lie finally collapses. Napoleon was an amateur. He tried to force the past to fit him. But before the emperor, there was a monk who understood the secret. He didn't just repair history, he rewrote it in glass and gold. The man who realized that if the truth is too fragile, you simply manufacture a miracle.